about COVID-19 and the precautions that we're taking at the school level to make sure that everything's okay. And so we'll turn the meeting over to those folks.
Mr. Cahill and Mr. Farr.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity. The facilities department, we have enhanced our cleaning and disinfecting efforts. We have, as of yesterday, all of the schools have an electrostatic disinfecting cleaner, and the head custodians of every school every morning are going through the school and they're hitting all the touch points. Doorknobs, light switches, panic bars. The entire nurses' suite is going to be disinfected, as well as all the fixtures in the bathrooms. So that's happening every day on a regular basis. The high schools, we also purchased an additional one for wrestling, weight room facilities, things like that, where we're constantly fighting MRSA. So we're going to really be able to get a handle on that with this. The product that we're using is called BioEsk, and it's a natural product. It will cause no harm. It can go from direct contact from table to mouth. So if kids are eating in cafeteria and we had hit the tables, it's absolutely fine. There's no issues whatsoever. It does have a little bit of they call it a lemongrass smell. To me, it's like a little Lysol-y. Some people like it, some people not so much. But it is a telltale that the work has been done, and that's what we like. So we know that when the teachers and the faculty come in, they'll smell that little faint odor, and then they'll have assurance that it was in fact disinfected. That, and we have also updated or enhanced our disinfecting throughout the classrooms. So what we typically do is sanitize. What we've started to do now is disinfect more often. We don't want to disinfect every day, everywhere, because that's not good. But like on Fridays in the afternoons, we are disinfecting all the cafeteria tables and things of that nature.
Notes around.
Yeah, we have posted notes on, or they're in the process of being posted on all bathroom doors, reminding everyone to wash their hands thoroughly. We're just making sure that the custodians stay active, stay on top of it, visit with the school nurses, see what's going on, and if there are any areas that are having issues where sickness and things like that, we're going to do our absolute best to get in there and take care of it. And that's not just for the coronavirus, in general. During flu season, from December until March, we're going to have a standard practice of upgrading our disinfecting to coincide with the flu season.
Please stop playing. Thank you.
Okay.
Are there any questions? Are there any questions before we move on?
What's the machine called again?
This is called a Protexus. There are two of them. They're made by the same company. One's green, it's called Victory. So most of the school districts have one or the other. And there are two different types of chemicals that can be used. One is it's like a chlorine. It gives like a little faint pool smell. That one you have to, if it's going to be used with direct contact to food, you have to rinse. So we chose to go with the bio product so that we're not putting anyone at any risk whatsoever if something was disinfected and not wiped down.
Okay, but you said it's an electrostatic.
Yes.
What is it? Electrostatic machine?
Yeah, you want to check it out?
Yeah, I'm just
It's
thinking,
like-
yeah, that's awesome.
Totally
How do I
cool.
explain this
It's like
to someone?
stormtrooper
Electrostatic machine.
Ghostbusters.
See?
Oh my God. Very important.
You'll see this.
I'm gonna Can you just spray this a little bit? Yeah. Make it mispronounce it.
That's the lemongrass smell.
It's not bad. It smells good.
And what it does is the electrostatic, it kind of magnetizes it, so when it sees the door handle or something, it wraps right around it.
Okay.
It's kind of like how they spray paint cars. They use electrostatic charge on it,
Okay.
so that everything adheres. That's what this is doing with the disinfectant.
1 minute kill time for the coronavirus, by the way.
I'm sorry, what?
1 minute kill time, so if that stands for 1 minute on any surface, it kills the coronavirus.
And we have these set right now. We can set it from 30 seconds up to 4 minutes. We have it on a 4-minute dwell time. So in 4 minutes, the mist will dry up, and that will kill 99.9% of all germs and viruses. When we're outside of flu season, we're going to wind it back down to maybe 30 seconds, so we're just sanitizing. Because we don't want to over disinfect. Yeah, so we have a lot of flexibility with this.
Why don't you want to over disinfect?
Well, because viruses get smart.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we don't want to overdo it.
Okay.
On the common touch points, you kind of have to, but we just don't want it everywhere all the time. We just want to use it appropriately. So this way, it's always a tool to have, So.
Any more questions?
Just in case this doesn't work and it comes and people start getting ill, is there a plan for like code?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.
Mrs.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Great job. Mrs. Walker's going to speak about the overall plan. We've been having a series of meetings. Latest that we just found out last evening that there's going to be a phone conference this afternoon from the DOE. We are working directly with the CDC and, of course, the Department of Education as it relates. And I've been in continuous contact with superintendents across Monmouth County, seeing exactly what others are doing. It was a very busy weekend for us. Mrs. Walker, myself, with the suspected case that turned out to not be a case as it relates to this latest virus strand. So, there's ongoing efforts, but really Mrs. Walker is leading the way with her work and what she's doing with meeting with administrators, meeting with, of course, Mr. Cahill and Mr. Farrar, and just making sure that the effort is coordinated across the district. So I'll turn it over to you.
So the first thing we did is we put up information back at the very end of January that we had received. We put a letter with all links to the CDC and JDOE, Department of Health, all information about the virus, and that is being updated. The links are being updated regularly, but we're actually going to update the letter probably by the end of today. We're working on a new letter with just some additional information on what's going on. Basically, stuff that you've heard today is going to be in the letter, which wasn't in it. So that, that's the preventative step. Also, we are sending a letter to all our staff today, just reminding them this really isn't different the way we would handle anything different than we would during flu season, right, Walter? I mean, these guns were ordered before this whole coronavirus came. This is just another flu that we have to really work hard to prevent from spreading it in our schools. Because it is, widely publicized and it seems to be very easily spread, maybe our efforts have to be stepped up a little bit, but it's not that much different than we've always done. So we're just reminding teachers in this email of all the protocols and practices that they themselves have to do, but also for their students, to remind their students. Education-wise, the PE and health classes and the science classes are going to be going over this a couple of times with the students, just to keep reminding them about it. Also, things like new students coming into the school, or students that may be coming back from an extended trip or something overseas, we're contacting the Department of Health and finding out what the risk level is. So far, there is nobody, I can guarantee there is nobody here that the Department of Health has determined as a risk level. They have, they will contact the parent and, ask them questions, interview them, contact us back. The Board of Health will contact us back and say, low risk, high risk, no risk. Every person has been no risk that has been, contacted. So you don't have to worry about that. We're on that. We are looking at attendance letters and that type of thing to kind of, even some of the schools, Mr. Curry, have, incentives for students to come to school all the time. Those things are being, pushed to the side for right now. We don't want students to come to school sick. We don't want staff to come to school sick. And so we're going to work on that. We never did, but we're going to make sure that that message goes out again and it's very strong, because we don't, if you have any fever or anything that is even a semblance of the flu, we want you to stay home until you feel better. Actually, you have to be fever-free for 24 hours without medication before you come back to school. The last piece of this is we're working on maintaining an education, some kind of education. Should there be some kind of closure of a school, part of a school, or the district, the curriculum department is working on that. So those are the things that we have in place and we're working on. Are there any questions or anything? Yes, Danielle?
The first thing we're going to hear, and I've already seen it on Facebook a dozen times, is the district tells us we can't miss X amount of days, but they tell you to keep your kid home sick, so what am I supposed to do? I mean, is this, you said you're kind of suspending that. Is that something public? Is that something we can
We are
push
working
out
on. We're working on what that plan exactly is. That's one of the things we're meeting on. We don't want to lift it because being in school is really important, but we do want to do it in such a way that parents know that if your child is sick, please keep them home, and we'll work with you on whatever consequences. Mainly the consequences are to their education. They're going to miss part of the education, and at high school, the consequence is losing credit, especially not graduating. So though at the high school level is the most important for us to really work on, to make sure that those students don't come to school sick, and we have a contingency plan basically. So
what I'd like to say about that too, though, what I'd like to say is, remember that those guidelines for the number of absence, all that, that's come from the state. They haven't come from Middletown. Those are the guidelines by the state. If you don't follow those guidelines by the state, people say, well, you don't 100% have to follow them. What you do when it comes down to funding on attendance rates and passing, CUSAC and all those, so that, there are measurables in place that we have to follow as it relates to that. But having said that, our position has always been that we will treat every child on an individual basis. We will handle every situation on a case-by-case basis, and we're going to continue to do that. What we are going to say is that we all should take a close look at what's happening right now, especially because when you really read all the research as it relates to this latest strand of virus, that for the vast majority of cases, the effects are maybe not as great originally as other strands of the flu. And if you're not immune compromised, or if you're not, it could run under the radar where people might come to school otherwise because the effects are less severe, and that would then cause a continuation of the spread. But like I said, we have a meeting with the DOE this afternoon at 4:15 where we're all gonna be online and hear what they have to say, and we'll take our direction. It's an ongoing process. We're going to be working with the DOE, we're going to be working with the CDC, and we're going to make sure that we're always current with our information, and that we push that information out to all of you. And so that's what I would say.
And also, the vast majority of students, well over 90%, never even come close to using the allotted days, the 18 days. It's not an issue for them. Like they shouldn't really be worried about that. It's the students that are more chronically ill that those are the ones that will end up working case by case with.
I agree, but 18 sounds like a lot in grammar school, middle school. In high school, it's not really 18 though. It's really not.
And that's what I said. The high school is our most, the one that we're focusing on right now, how we're going to handle that. Okay, and I'm sure that our guidance
probably
today
be a letter
by
or something that'll go
the
out.
Department of Ed will help us.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes.
I know obviously hand washing is probably the number one thing that everybody should be doing, and I know I tell my kids when you go to the bathroom at school, when you're going to, make sure you wash really well for like the 20 seconds or whatever. I guess I would just encourage that the teachers reiterate that to the kids, especially when they're using the bathroom.
That's what this letter's all about
Good.
today. That's going to staff from our head nurses. Yes.
Okay, cool. And then also, if a child goes in the bathroom and there's not soap or there's not paper towels, who should they tell? I know my girls have told me at Thompson sometimes, oh, well, there was no soap today in the bathroom. I'm like, oh, well, did you go find the school nurse or the custodian? You got to tell somebody. Well, no, I just had to go back to class because I was going to be late.
I would think the teacher would be the person that they would inform.
Yeah, so I actually emailed the teachers late last week to reinforce the same things that you were just saying regarding, keep reminding your kids, and I'm sure as you have, is to keep washing your hands. I know that there's been a couple cases of soap running out a couple times at Thompson. I know that, and I've monitored over the last week, that they are being replenished every morning. I know I spoke with one parent last night regarding the same issue, and I'm trying to ascertain as to when that their child has gone to the bathroom. So like,
When in
you
the
know,
day, yeah.
exactly. So like lunchtime, upstairs girls' bathroom. You know, so I let my custodian know to make sure to check that. So those are some of the things we're troubleshooting.
So
But
we
if
should
they
have
tell
the kids
their
though
staff-
tell their teacher?
Yeah, and the teacher
Yeah, so-
can email principal.
Yep, typically there's a whole duty teacher out there, or they
Okay.
just go back and let their teacher know.
Okay.
And I've also let the teachers know to let us know so we can get it replenished.
Perfect, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I'm sure your staff is checking continuously too, to make sure so
Absolutely.
shouldn't have to come to a student report. right?
Correct.
We don't want it to come to a
Yes.
student.
Yeah, no, I understand, but obviously
Yes.
if they're washing their hands a lot, that's good.
Yes.
So it's gonna run out quicker.
We will, the facilities, we'll send out an email to requesting that the head custodians ensure they clean the building, the bathrooms midday, and check the dispensers to make sure
Thank
they're
you.
full. So we'll clean them again on top of that, just to.
You're right, they're saying hand washing is the #1 way to prevent the spread. Yes.
Is the letter that's going to the teachers from the nurse saying hand washing over using antibacterial stuff?
Yes, hand washing is the #1.
So
The
that's gonna be
CDC has come
clear.
out and said hand washing is the #1 thing to prevent the spread. Yes. Yes.
So on the topic of hand washing, I have two things. One, in these procedures we're teaching the students, are we teaching them about like opening the doorknob with a paper towel, like making sure the garbage can is near the door so that they can open the doorknob with a paper towel, because someone may not wash their hands. Now you just cleaned your hands, now you touch a dirty doorknob and go back out into the school. So would that be some type of procedure we can make sure happens? Or just, I don't know how all the bathrooms are, have the doors open so that you're not even dealing with the doorknob.
That is not in the letter, I can tell you that right now.
Okay.
What is in the letter though is teaching students, and this is going to be part of the health of PE too, and put out to the staff, including the principals, is to like prevent students from having to shake each other's hands, elbow bumps. A lot of times morning meetings have students maybe holding hands, that type of thing. We're going to try to minimize so that they're not touching each other. But that's something, thank you, it's something to think about, moving forward. We'll talk to Walter about that.
Yeah, that would be great. And then the second thing is, we're on this whole same topic of hand washing, and since it has been shown to be the best thing, more effective than Purell, is there any way we can like ease up on the schedule just slightly so that there can be time for them to wash hands before they eat? I mean, I know that's time consuming, and I know that's why it's
We will
not
talk to
done
the
in
principals
Purell.
about that, to see how they fit in that schedule, okay? Because, before and after, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really important.
When will we have an idea what the plan would be if school closures are necessary?
We're working on that. It's gonna take a little bit of time. One of the things we have to put out is a survey to find out who has connectivity, that type of thing. So it's gonna take a little bit of time, but it's, there's a couple of layers to it, but we definitely are,
So we're not sure when that would.
no, I don't have a date.
We'll take our direction from the state on that, because the last time around, about a year ago, the state came out with a proposal, was any districts into doing snow days as counting in school days, and because we were a one-to-one initiative, it was something I put it out to the state that we were one of the districts. There were a number of districts that were interested in participating in that. In the end, the proposal didn't go through. What we are doing is meeting with curriculum to think about, okay, this wouldn't just be like an online class, right? So it would be like a remote lesson for the day, which is a great opportunity for students to do student-directed learning. So our pedagogy really aligns very well with this. Project-based assessment, personalized learning aligns very well with the potential of doing this. So we have set up a meeting with all the curriculum people to set what exactly this would look like, and then from there we would break it down to grade levels in elementary and that type of thing. So that's really the next step as it comes to that. However, the state has given no definite direction. It has hinted. The Commissioner Repillette has talked about the possibility, but this is not the first time that's happened, and that didn't come to fruition.
Possibility,
last time.
right now, if we were to close down schools, an online course or, a class, Google Classroom would not count for a school day. That was something that we learned in Sandy, what we wanted to do with then. So, but like Dr. George said yesterday in the address, the governor's address, the commissioner did kind of talk about it. So, we're just keeping our ears and eyes open to that. We're going to be prepared.
So you can't implement that until the state says you're allowed to.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
But we
Other than that, as of right now though, it's like a snow day.
Yeah.
It would be, or the time that we had off in Sandy, we would just come back on the back end. That's where we are right now. We're hopeful, we're planning, we're being prepared, we're moving forward proactively in case it comes online. We would love to be one of those participating districts.
Okay. Thank you. Is there any more questions? Thank you very much for that departure from the agenda, but I think it was an important topic. So let's move on to the district update with Dr. George.
Yeah, and with strategic planning, Mrs. Rogers, please feel free to step in if you want to, or anyone else. But so the next steps, everybody knows we have a lot of information on our website, and this document is really like a moving document. It's actual. There's a lot of minutes in there. There'll be more added by the other presentations that are happening. Mrs. Gallagher and I got our stuff in there early. But that we're going to continue to build that so that when you leave here, you just have a document that has a significant amount of information. So where we were when we came to the end of Form 3B is that we said that things were going to start to move quickly because we were at the intersection between the budget, the strategic plan, the loss of state aid. That's still exactly where we are to this point. Right now, we're getting through this budget, budget time. As we know, and Mrs. Doherty is going to speak about the budget a little more in a couple minutes. So where we are is as soon as the budget is done, the proposal for consolidation, whatever happens with that, and the budget are completed, the next steps from there then will be for us to write those measurable outcomes. It's our goal between now and the end of in late spring to do that process and to move forward with that process. What we know, the type of things that we know that we still have to do before we're done is an updated demographic study. But in saying an updated demographic study, I want to be clear that we're in a 3-year of a 5-year demographic study, and the information in that is accurate. It's running consistent with what the plan told us that where we were going to be, and so we know that information is really quite accurate. But we're going to take that information and there are going to be other measurable outcomes. One of the things that that we've talked about a lot as it relates to the consolidation proposal is this the strategic plan? No, this is not the strategic plan. There are consistent or important measurable outcomes that still have to come that the board and we are in the process of talking about, like redistricting and other things that the board is considering. What we know, where we are right now, with our significant decrease in state aid to this point, and the significant decrease that we still have to get to. There's a misperception if we and this is what our budget presentation is going to be about. So I can't really give all this information to you before the board and the public actually sees that presentation. But if you look at our body of work, if you look at our budget presentations over the last 5 years, what you're going to see is that we have been working diligently inside of our current configuration to try to reduce our footprint. We have used attrition of positions, reassigned those positions to other places. At the same time, we've had to deal with a significant increase in unfunded mandates that were important, whether they be special education, our improvements in inclusion, whether they be regular education with tiered intervention, or even our gifted and talented program, or whether they be security. We've done so much work and added so many positions as it relates to security. My direction as superintendent, all I do is make recommendations that the board votes on, is that the long-term financial sustainability of this district, we are not in a place where we can merely say, we're going to tighten our belts anymore. 35 positions in the last 2 years have come offline alone, just in the last 2 years. We're already at that place. We're at that intersection where if we do not make a significant change in our footprint, and this is just step one in that change in this footprint, we are not going to be able to protect the fidelity of our programs and our services and be able to guarantee the level of instruction that this school community has become accustomed to. So the rest of it is just notes in there, so that you have it, so that you know, so that you can share it. And that's my hope. Always my hope is never that you agree with me. It's always the expectation that, you know, that you question. Of course, you should, and you have every right, and I respect your right to do that, but that you have the information. So if you could share that information, we'll be building that over the next day or two, Margie, so that, you know, the public can have more information. So at that point, I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Doherty, who's going to talk about where we are with the budget and what the updates are, and then we'll move on from there.
We're going to have another budget workshop meeting tomorrow night, and that would be to update on what we've had since, information we've had since the last budget workshop, which is back on February 5th. The one thing that we do know for sure at this point is our state aid number. We did get our allocation. It was about $30,000 less than what we had anticipated, but it was, you know, we were very close in our estimate. We were estimating a reduction of about $850,000. It came in at a reduction of about $880,000. We also, with that notice, we're informed that we are going to be responsible for 2 charter school students this year, and that was about another $47,000 that we'll have to pay out. So that was also with the notice. Another big driver of the budget that we are working on right now is our health insurance. We don't have, we just hired a broker in the last few weeks, and they've been working on our renewal, but we don't have finite information at this point. The indicators that we are getting back from our loss ratios for our claims experience on our different lines of insurance is that we're running very high. So we're not, you know, we do have, and we were hoping to build in a reduction, you know, on the estimate that we have for health insurance in our budget right now. But at this point, it's not clear that we can rely on that, and we'll talk about that more on Wednesday. So we don't have a lot of new information besides what we've already presented, but which was, just to refresh everyone's memory, we were looking at a shortfall for next year of about $2.5 million between revenues and expenses. And the board and the administrative team have been working on ways to address that. You know, a significant part of that at this point is this consolidation proposal between Port Monmouth and New Monmouth. But, you know, besides that, we have about another $1.3 million worth of adjustments to the budget that we are looking at to close that $2.5 million gap. So we'll be going over that more on Wednesday. But there are still a lot of variables, like, you know, that we will be dealing with past Wednesday, and we need to adopt our tentative budget on March 18th, which is in a couple of weeks, and that will then be submitted to the Department of Education to review. At that point, you know, we still have time to make adjustments before we do our final hearing at the end of April, early May. We have to schedule a meeting for that because our April voting meeting doesn't fall within the time frame. But there are still a lot of moving parts, not just insurance, but also in personnel and things like that, where we're actually looking at the possibility that we may need to cover more than an additional $1.3 million if we have to add additional staffing and so forth. So these are all things that we're still looking at and vetting through and trying to adjust for. But it's an ongoing process. We will be, present more depth tomorrow night. But it's, one way or the other, we have to come up with a plan to submit for our tentative budget by February. So I think that's all.
Great, thank you. Yes. So I think next, as requested, the teacher tenure evaluation observation. Mrs. Alfone. And, I'm sorry. I know that Ms. O'Hagan and Ms. Alfone are both presenting. tag team, and I'm sure they're gonna uphold things. They're related.
Good morning, everyone. So, what I said to myself as I was putting this presentation together, because I live, breathe, eat, dream, achieve NJ, and all of the rules, regulations, is don't talk education speak. Talk simply, talk in terms that you will understand. This presentation is linked to your agenda, so you can go over it at your own convenience. If you have further questions or anything that you wish to have additional clarification, you can always reach out to me, to call me, to schedule a meeting, and I will be glad to go over it in more detail. The first thing that you really need to know is that our teacher evaluation model changed in 2012 as a result of a law called Teach NJ that was enacted by our legislation. This was a huge, huge change. Up until 2012, all districts evaluated teachers. They had some form that they did. It was totally by district. They had the forms look however they felt that they should look, but it was in no way connected to student achievement. So in 2012, along with Teach NJ, comes a very, very comprehensive, detailed method of teacher evaluation that must be implemented in every district in New Jersey that connects teacher performance to student achievement. That's the big game changer. And we're happy to have that because we have teachers doing significant work and helping our students make great strides in their achievement. So this was implemented as a result of the Teach NJ Act in 2012, and the evaluations actually began under Achieve NJ, which is sort of the umbrella under Teach NJ that governs everything about teacher evaluations. Okay, so at the beginning of every school year, it's our responsibility to make sure that teachers and all of our employees know exactly what their evaluations are going to be rated on. So for teachers that are what we call, and here's where I'm trying to get away from education speak, if they're an MSGP teacher, all that means is if they're a teacher of students who get tested by the New Jersey Student Learning Assessment, used to be PARC. Those are teachers in 4th grade through 8th grade in English Language Arts, and teachers in 4th grade through 7th grade in math. So when those kids that are assigned to those teachers through a number take a test, the results of those students' tests come back, get attached to the teacher, and it's part of their summative evaluation score. So this year, teacher practice for those teachers who have tested students, teacher practice, and that's their classroom evaluations done by multiple administrators, counted for 70% of their summative score. Their SGO, again, don't want to go too crazy here, but that is a student growth objective. Every teacher has to have at least one, if they are a teacher that has tested grade levels, student growth objective. All others have to have 2. And that is where they sit down with their administrator and they target their student performance. They look for areas that they need to work on, whether it be a small group of students, the whole class, a special tier of students. And they set up in September, here's my plan for this year. Here's how I'm going to work on this particular facet of student growth. That gets measured throughout the year. There's a mid-year check-in to see how they're doing, and it gets scored and calibrated with a numerical score at the end of the year. That is part of their summative evaluation. And their MSGP, that's how much does the testing component count, is 5%. I did put this little box up here because we just got a new update from the state that they are recommending that there be a change to this. So they're recommending that the teacher practice reflect 80% and the SGO reflect 15%. For non-SGP teachers, your
kindergarten, first, second, third grade teacher, your teachers in 9 through 12, they are not SGO teachers. No test score comes back to them and impacts their evaluation. They have their SGO counting as 15%, and they have to do 2. They have to come up with 2 separate student growth objectives that they follow through the entire year. They collect data, they produce measurable evidence so that they can sit down with their evaluator at the end of the year and decide how did they go forward in meeting that SGO. Okay, next slide, Jess. Okay, so each teacher gets a summative score at the end of the year. That summative score is a result of their teacher practice. Those are the evaluations that they get. If you are a non-tenured teacher, you must be evaluated at least 3 times a year with a formal evaluation. Some include post-conferences, pre-conferences, but they all include post-conferences, where you will sit with an administrator, review the lesson, the areas that need working on. Teachers ask questions, they seek out resources. Administrators try in any way, shape, or form to provide those teachers with any supports they need to continually improve their practice to improve student achievement. The connection is now to student growth and student achievement. There are SGOs, again, they get scored, and their student growth percentile if they were in a tested group. All of those come up with a summative rating that every teacher gets, a numerical summative rating at the end of the year that ranges from 0 to 4. Okay. Again, this is just a graph, you can look at it at your leisure, that shows you the percentage for non-tested grades and tested grades and how much of each component goes into making their summative score. Go ahead, Jess. Okay, now the teacher evaluation. It's not just an administrator coming in and saying, oh, this looks really good, the kids are quiet, they're behaved, they're working well. It's extremely, extremely important that you understand that we as a district in New Jersey are required to use an evaluation model that is approved by the state of New Jersey. There are several models that are approved, but they all contain the same elements, and that's planning and preparation, classroom environment indicators, instructional indicators, and professional responsibilities. These are all scored on a scale of 1 to 4. 1 being ineffective, 2 being partially effective, 3 being effective, and 4 being highly effective. Every single one of these indicators gets scored every time an administrator goes in and they watch a lesson. And they can't just go in and say, great lesson. Flip to the next one, please, Jess. This is where we are doing an excellent job of truly getting into the classrooms, watching student engagement, watching what's happening when a teacher works with a group of students, because we collect evidence. We collect real-time evidence. When administrators go into classrooms, I guide them that they should go in and be kind of like a court stenographer. Student said, student did. Teacher said, teacher did. And keep an ongoing record of what's happening in that classroom, then going back and looking at the evaluation and seeing, was that highly effective? Was it effective, partially, or ineffective? And with all of the approved New Jersey State evaluation models, the student and the connection with the student and the student engagement is where you will find teachers scoring highly effective. All of the descriptors of the highly effective performance include things like students took charge of their classrooms, students shared with other students, students took an active role. It's so incredibly important for us as a district who is trying to move so far away from the teacher at the front of the classroom lecturing at a group of students to a district where we are teachers who are enabling learning to take place and enabling students to take ownership of their learning. That is the only way they are going to get high scores on their evaluations. If there's evidence that they are truly engaging students and students are being given the opportunity to take ownership in the learning and what's happening in the classroom. Okay. We have had a new, I shouldn't say new, but a newly celebrated opportunity for teachers who were highly effective in this district. If you were highly effective in your previous year, you can choose, instead of one of your traditional evaluations, to create a portfolio of practice. And we're calling it a personalized reflective protocol, where teachers can find something in their practice that they feel they want to get better at, they want to grow in this particular area. We give those highly effective teachers the opportunity, in lieu of one of those classroom observations where an administrator will come in and sit down, to come up with something that they are passionate about, that they know their practice will grow, and the end result is their students will benefit. It's always got to be based upon something that is going to enable them to continue highly effective practices, which are striving all the time for personalized learning, for individualized needs, for targeted instruction, for differentiation, for giving students the opportunity to grow and empower them. If you just go back to this, if you ever have any interest, these are just live links that you can open, you don't need to do it now, Jess, that you'll see the forms and how teachers have to document how they're going to reflect on their practice, how they're going to grow their practice. It's a lot of work, and I am so pleased to tell you that with a great deal of effort on Mrs. Alphone's part in helping to revise that form, we had an 873% increase in teachers who chose to take advantage of this personalized reflective protocol instead of one of their traditional evaluations. Now, that sounds like a lot. We had 11 teachers do it last year. We have 109 teachers doing it this year, and we see even more coming next year. So it's moving by word of mouth. Teachers are spreading how this work is positive and how they're grabbing a hold of what they're passionate about and what they know their students need to grow their practice to meet those students' personalized needs. Okay, how do you acquire tenure? Very different from in the past, where you basically came to school for 3 years, and if there were no big problems, with your evaluation process, on the first day of your third year, you had tenure. Now it's very different. You have to, by law, you have to be effective in your evaluation and your summative score. Your very first year, it's almost like a bye. Teachers are kind of getting used to it. Teachers are kind of working their way through, understanding what the evaluation process requires of them, how they can become highly effective. However, in years 2, 3, and 4, they must receive effective or highly effective ratings on their summatives, or they do not get tenure. If they do, on the first day of their 5th year, so this is after 4 years of practice, they would receive tenure. Can tenure ever be taken away? Click to the next slide. First step, if a teacher is not effective in their summative evaluation, they're partially effective or ineffective, automatically it's mandated they have to be put on a corrective action plan. We dive deeply into what were the components of their evaluation, where there was a weakness, where they were not scoring in the effective to highly effective domain, and a very, very comprehensive, intense plan has to be created with the supervisor, with the building principal. There are deadlines, there are certain criteria and tiers of accomplishment that are embedded into the corrective action plan that teachers have to strive to meet. We also offer resources. It's during this time of a corrective action plan that we don't just throw a teacher out there and say, you didn't make highly effective or effective, so you're on a corrective action plan now. We also try to find what are the resources you need, what can we do for you? Can we send you to other teachers' classrooms? Can we send you to a workshop? Can we provide more resources for you? So it's not a gotcha by any means. Our goal is if a teacher has dipped into an area where they're on a CAP, a corrective action plan, we try to get them out of that CAP domain. However, if after, you can go to the next one, Jeff. Sure. Okay. If after 2 years they are still ineffective, they have an ineffective year 1, an ineffective year 2, or partially effective and an ineffective, there is no gray area here. The superintendent must file charges of inefficiency, which is to challenge their right to maintain tenure. If they were ineffective 1 year and partially effective the next year, which kind of shows that they have made a slight improvement, they've gone from ineffective to partially effective, or if they were partially effective 2 years in a row, the superintendent may file charges of inefficiency and delay until the next year. But this does not protect them, because the next year, should there still be a partially effective, it would again be automatically, they would have to file with the state for tenure charges. The process to go through revoking tenure is much more simple than it ever was before. You don't go before administrative law judges. There are arbitrators that have been trained, mediators who have been trained to review tenure cases, and they're done more swiftly. And if a teacher is not meeting the criteria, and if the student achievement is not being obtained, they will lose their tenure. We have not, to date, ever brought tenure charges since this was enacted in 2013. Okay. Again, I'm not gonna go in depth through this because you've heard this over and over again, because it's the mantra of our district. The goals that teachers set for themselves for their personal development plan, the goals that they set in terms of student achievement growth, are all based on the district goals. That's where we start. The hierarchy starts with what are our district goals. The school goals should dovetail with the district goals. Each individual staff member's SGO or PGO should connect to the school goals and the staff PDPs. That's their professional development plan. And at the end of all of that is increased student achievement. That's never going to change. We're always looking for how do we help our students achieve, and how do we help our students fare better in this very competitive world. We know a lot of it has to do with our very important goal of personalized learning and targeting and finding how do we light that fire? How do we evoke the passion in children to learn? And all of these goals are linked to that. Okay, yes. I already talked about SGOs. I do want to just read this one bullet there. If an SGO, if a teacher has developed a student growth objective, and remember, every teacher, if they don't get test scores attached to their summative evaluation, they have to write 2 SGOs, 2 student growth plans. If they do get test scores, they only have to write 1. But if they're functioning at the higher level, they reflect collaborative teaching practices, they're aligned with the standards, instruction, and assessment, and they're always focused on improving student learning. Okay. Alignment to standards, grounded in data. We are big on data here. We don't have teachers just put in very fluffy little goals like, oh, my kids will feel happier in the class this year. It's targeted ability to monitor student progress using data. And we, of course,
Sean, if I could just add to that,
sure.
In that process, and I've sat in on those meetings, and what that process looks like, and it's really, really important. So we have grade level teams, we have our building level administration working with subject specific of educators and instructors, which is really important as a generalist. I want to speak as a generalist, to be working alongside to help us all to make sure we're being instructional leaders, providing all the things that the teachers need to be successful, professional development, clear direction, measurable outcomes, all of that working in that moment. And then we have our school-wide innovation teams. And I've already completed the evaluation of all 17 principals to this point, one evaluation. And one of the things that we really sat down and talked about is what we were doing with those innovation teams, because they're really focused on our curricular efforts. Building level goals are connected to district goals, and the professional development is implemented from that. So that's a really important point to make that Charlene hit on, is just how directed, collaborative, but directed that process is to make sure that we have evidence of measurable outcomes that lead to student growth. That's what that moment's about.
I mean, picture it as though it's a tapestry that we're weaving. Every single strand that we're weaving into that comes from exactly what Dr. George was referencing. What are the teachers saying? What are the school data teams saying? What are the learning design teams saying? What are the students saying? How are we weaving everything into this one big tapestry that helps Middletown be a student-focused district that is absolutely determined to work on personalized learning and personalized student growth? Okay, I'm gonna hand this over to Jess. Part of Achieve NJ also requires, and it's a great requirement, if we have a new teacher, brand new out of school or brand new to the profession, we don't just throw them into the classroom and say, have at it. We have a detailed mentoring plan, which, again, Mrs. Alphone does a stellar job.
Thank you. So I just want to kind of reiterate what everybody had said in regards to, this year has been kind of the turning point for us in regards to connecting all the dots for staff members at large around the district. And it has come with the intersection of these learning design teams in the buildings, very directed on building goals, but also connecting that to all these accountability and compliance pieces, because without that connectivity, those things just become exercises in checking the boxes. And someone created these at some point in time with intention, so it's been our kind of mission this year to re-emphasize and re-energize people in understanding how these can work to our advantage. I think we've done a really great job of that across the district. Charlene had spoken about the mentoring requirement. She touched upon it in regards to the tenure process. So I work with teachers in year one as they're newly acquiring their roles as professionals. There are two paths that teachers can take when they come from a four-year institution. You are either granted what is known as a certificate of eligibility with advanced standing, which means you've gone to a college or university with the intention of becoming a teacher. You've taken education courses. The other type of certification is a CE, which is simply a certificate of eligibility, and that's really more commonly referred to as alternate route. Here in Middletown, we fortunately have the luxury of most of our applicants are CEAS candidates. We're a big district. We have a really strong reputation in the hiring community. So we tend to kind of almost have our pick of the litter in regards to certifications, because I'd much rather have someone to start out with that has had some experiences and some coursework in education. Alternate route requires you to kind of take those courses on the job, so to speak. Occasionally, we do have to hire that route when we have hard to fill positions. So you might have someone maybe in a particular high school level course where the certification is not a commonly held one, so you'd be more apt to find CEs at that point. The mentoring requirement for both certificates is the same. The understanding is that when you're mentoring someone with a CE versus a CEAS, that the work is more intensive for the mentor because they're working with people that don't have, educational experiences. But, there's other requirements that become involved in that from a certification standpoint and not necessarily a mentoring standpoint. So In order to receive what is known as a standard certification, it's actually a 3-year process. So as soon as you graduate from college, you get awarded your CE or your CEAS. Once you are hired, you trip into something known as provisional status. And provisional status is kind of that like tryout period, so to speak. And if you do fulfill the requirements of newly hired individuals, you will eventually have the opportunity to apply for that standard certification. Now, it doesn't align with the 4-year tenure track. Tenure is separate. This is for certification only. So in year 1, the certification requirement is that you are under the guidance of a mentor for 30 weeks. Now, that 30 weeks isn't always a continuous 30 weeks dependent on employment, because leaves do have the opportunity to still have a mentor. And if here our guideline is like a 50-day threshold, if someone's gonna hold a position for 50 days, and there's a reason why, and I'll get to that in a minute, we do pair them with a mentor. So year 1 is that 30 weeks of mentoring. It must be a tenured staff member, and it must be someone that has, as Mrs. O'Hagan spoke about, effective or highly effective on their summative rating. Again, fortunately, we're large. We can select the best. Middletown also has an interview and hiring process for mentorship, because we place great importance on the role of the mentor, and we do want to make sure that we're pairing our novice teachers with the best and most experienced in the district. We have really evolved our kind of matching process over the course of time, where we have been able to strategically and intentionally make what I like to refer to as ideal pairings. And to me, an ideal pairing is same building, same content, or grade level. And I'm happy to say that probably 95% of our pairings are like that. It gets tricky in elementary when you hire a special area teacher, music, art, phys ed, because sometimes they're shared. So you might not always have someone in the same building the whole time. So, we always look for the ideal pairing first, and we do have a core group of teachers within the district that routinely serve as mentors and just believe in the value of the process and are definitely people that help our new educators and guide them. So, we've really grown this program and this process over, I would say, the last 2 or 3 years to a place where our novices are getting, just top-notch support all the time. So years 2 and 3, we don't just send them on their way. They aren't required to have a mentor, but they are required, as Mrs. O'Hagan said, they do get more observations than tenured staff. They work more intimately with directors, content directors, building administrators, myself. I'm still monitoring their progress over time. As the person that helps them through their licensure in this novice phase, I do observe the majority of year 1, 2, and 3 teachers within the district, and that's intentional because I want to be involved in their process and be able to support them, because the understanding is that, and Mrs. O'Hagan also talked about that kind of like year 1 buy year, right? We're not assuming that anybody is coming out of their collegiate experience as a polished, seasoned veteran. This is a growth model, and our goal is to support their growth, not only in their first phases of their career, but continuing along, as they kind of live throughout their entire year, which I'll get to when I talk a little bit about professional development. So,
Ms. Southbone, could I just interject there though? But I will say this, through the work of Monmouth University, with the year-long partnership for this process, we're developing a multi-year process. We're coming out with candidates, and this is really important on a couple different fronts, as it relates to our budget, as it relates to our budget, and as it relates to their ability to really be seasoned teachers upon graduation. So we all know for our own children, some of us have children in college, those internships is really important. What we've developed with Monmouth, and Monmouth has really been in the national forefront in doing this, in teacher residency, is developing a multi-year program. So what happens is, by the time these young people graduate college, they know intimately our district initiatives, our programs, our curriculum, and they are more likely to get hired as they really position themselves in the national forefront for this. Many of the other universities, colleges, and universities across the state are really jumping on board. Mrs. Alphone put together a great presentation for all universities saying, this is our work with Monmouth, and this is now our standard. So if you want to do student teaching, what was student teaching is now student residency, with us, you're going to have to do it differently. There's going to have to be added value. The Monmouth students are available before and after the day. The Monmouth students are substituting in our district. The Monmouth students are doing these kind of things. And this is the kind of added value that you're going to have to create in a competitive process, because everybody needs these residency placements. You're going to have to provide added value for us if in turn we're going to utilize your college or your university. So I will say, kudos to you and your work on that. Kudos to Dean Henning and their work at Monmouth University on that, because it's really, and what's happening now is from all colleges and universities, who's ever serving with us in a multi-year deal, we're offering contracts to. We're not getting all of them. Some are going back home where, when we lose them, it's only because we lose them because, well, I'm from Pennsylvania and I'm going to be going back to Pennsylvania, or I'm from North Jersey and I need to live home for a couple years and this is too far for me to commute. So we don't get them all, but we get a significant number of them, and they are highly qualified. And through the work of Mrs. Alphone, also Mr. Falco has really been integral in this work, and he works directly with Monmouth University as well. We have really developed a model that's a national model in middle.
Yeah, and there are many individuals who are probably at this point, year 1, 2, and 3, who have reaped the benefits of that model, and came through those clinical residency ranks, were hired within our district. We actually have someone that is hired in our district that maintained the same clinical resident oversight, and then that person was their mentor in year 1. So imagine the continuity and the consistency in working with an individual over a multi-year span as the person is preparing for the workforce and then entering the workforce. So we have put ourselves in a position where we have the ability to be choosy about who we're hiring, and many of them do come from Monmouth University. And to be quite honest, even those universities that aren't, some people still submit these requests in piecemeal, half a year, and we still believe in the model so strongly that we intentionally still place them with the same individual for both halves of the year, because we want them to get that comprehensive full year experience, because we feel like it's that important and that beneficial. Let me click my side. Sorry. No, it's okay.
Jess, I should add, if you are a highly effective teacher and you are choosing that personalized reflective practice, one of the things that will meet that criteria is if you choose to be a mentor and oversee someone as a clinical intern for the whole year, and you report out on that, and you keep copious notes and details about how that person has progressed in their year-long work under your tutelage.
The opportunity to self-evaluate shows how we value teacher leadership, and how important teacher leadership is to building a consistent culture of professional development and learning, lifelong learning.
So, and that's actually a great segue, so thank you. So I'm gonna talk, not so much about novice teachers anymore, but they still fall into this kind of idea here. We have really spent a lot of time and effort in philosophically kind of shifting our mindset in regards to teacher professional development. It used to be something just in the state in general that was like something we gave to teachers, like I'm gonna teach you something, or I'm gonna show you something to enhance your practice. And all of the research really is anti, or points in the opposite direction of that being a really effective model for promoting growth in adult learners.
Or student learners.
And and that's kind of the funny thing about it, is that we promote, and I'm talking we like globally in education, promote so much personalization and autonomy and choice, and sparking curiosity and being self-reflective with our student populations. And we often question, like, why do these tenets not hold true for the adults in the organization, when actually the research all points to the direction that adult learners will thrive in conditions of autonomy and choice and self-reflection. So we have moved to a model where we have really turned over ownership and autonomy to our teaching staff. And I'm not saying, they can choose something out of thin air and it would be okay. It is based on conversations, collaboration, evaluative feedback, because that's really the driver behind a teacher's professional development and professional, what I like to call, learning plan for the year. And it was, again, this idea of taking these compliance features that we've been so accustomed to in education, and instead of checking the box, really using it for what its probably original intended purposes were. So each year, staff members are required to create something called a professional development plan. And a lot of times it comes out of initiatives across the district, which, absolutely 100% helps when we have something new coming online for ourselves. However, we've really said to teachers, look, we want you to take a reflective look at your evaluation data, at your informal, kind of evaluation data that people are giving you, in what initiatives are existing within the district, where you reflect upon your skill set to be, and we want you to create a really personalized goal for yourself to pursue during the course of a school year. This is not done in isolation. This is done oftentimes, and we encourage it, collaboration with other colleagues that might have a similar interest or a need or be participating in a similar initiative. And we allow teachers to have that autonomy to kind of drive their own year of learning. And I have to say, our feedback on this has been 100% like fantastic, positive. And teachers finally, I feel that they have the time to pursue something that makes a benefit and an impact on student growth, versus, someone telling them they have to do this. When choice becomes involved, and our teachers are all very, very diligent and very reflective, we're just putting in their laps the opportunity for them to grow as professionals. Now, this is great for us because a challenge in a district this large with over 1,000 employees is to increase capacity for the whole. Because no matter who I put in front of that group, that 1,000-person audience, if we were gonna deliver mass professional development, it will not accommodate the needs of 1,000 people. Even in a small district, I cannot accommodate the needs of 1,000 people to grow in their capacity as teachers. This allows us to do that. Now, this is not without supports, like I said. So our stance has been, let's give autonomy, and then our role administratively becomes, let's get them the resources they need and the structures they need to thrive and to grow. And growth is relative to self. So the reflective piece is the most important part of this. And the conversation with teachers and administrators together, looking at that evaluative data and that evaluative feedback and places that might be of need for growth, things that might just be of interest to people depending on the point in your career or where your skill set lies. This accommodates all those ranges. And what it's also done, kind of this unintentional consequence, but it was a benefit, is that it's created all these professional learning networks across the district. Because what we've been able to do kind of from that 80,000 foot perspective is see, because we're huge, right? So someone who exists at Navesink might never talk to a teacher at River Plaza, right? And they might not know they have an interest in the same thing. But what I can do from that 80,000 foot perspective is kind of match those people together, even if it's just online, like kind of this virtual space. So taking advantage of all those technological tools we have to create these, what they're referred to as professional learning networks, where now people are working together in pockets, collaborating on either a need or an interest to help grow their practice and impact student learning positively. So this has really been kind of the intersection of a lot of great things. And Dr. George talked about it, our learning design teams. They have been the catalysts in the buildings for what teachers have reflected as that it might be a need in their grade level, in their content area, or individually. And so many of these little professional learning networks have cropped up all over the district. And it's really what learning should look like, not only for kids, but for adults as well. I feel that we're in a spot where I think all of our teachers have grown this year relative to themselves. And that is 100% the most important thing, because in old models of PD, I know we could not say that. I really believe that way, and people are excited about it. I think they're excited for the autonomy and the opportunity for choice. So, that's kind of how we've handled professional development. It's been, I think, probably a 2-year evolution at this point, but we're really in a really great spot. And I feel that not because I'm overseeing it, but because I feel the energy from the staff. And that's the indicator to me. Oftentimes PD gets a bad rap, teachers kind of, here we go again, another thing. That is not the feedback at all. The feedback is energy and excitement, which tells me that we're doing this right.
And if I could interject there, this is an equal passion for you and I. This is what we get really excited about. When we talk about professional development, for me, that's all about consistent delivery of instruction and making sure we're providing the best opportunity for student success, student growth, and student outcomes, right? And but I'm the superintendent. My role is different, right? So I got to talk about accountability. Traditional PD has no accountability. You walk in the room, you sit in there, you watch whatever it is the initiative is, then you're left to isolation in your classroom to go back and implement it. What we've outlined here for you has significant measurable outcomes. Because the other piece that we didn't have is, with that portfolio, we can see whether or not you're consistently implementing this with your students and what it looks like. And then to take it to the very next level, when we link this to what we're doing with our data warehouse and link it, and how those administrators, and I'm sitting in those meetings where building level leaders are leading grade level teams to discuss exactly how every student in the 4th grade is doing, how every student in the 2nd grade is doing, how every student in the 5th grade is doing. That's so important, because when we talk about personalized learning, and we talk about planning and preparing with an individualized approach for how we deliver instruction, all of what we just spoke about is where the rubber meets the road. And Mrs. Alphone does a phenomenal job with this. Our building level administrators being there in all of their meetings and watching those, the grade level articulation and what's going on and what teachers are talking about. I know that everybody goes, okay, what teacher am I going to get this year in this grade in this school? Everybody knows this teacher is amazing. But what you know about us is we're implementing that instruction the same way. Whether you get that teacher that everybody hears about, or you're the one that goes, oh, I wanted this one and I got that one. No, in Middletown, our goal is no matter who you get, you're getting that type of consistent implementation of instruction, and it's our responsibility. Building level leaders, right? We talk about this all the time. Central office, well, you're pushed down now to building too, but all of us working collaboratively to make sure we're getting this. And that's I think where education is going. And I have to say, we're ahead of the curve with this. We're ahead of most. I really believe that. So
I just want to add one more thing that I should have added when I talked about the personalized reflective protocol, which teachers can do in lieu of an evaluation. One of the components of that is student survey. Teachers surveying their students to get their students' insights in what this particular project that they have taken on or they are implementing in their classroom, how is it being perceived by the students, and how is it affecting change in the classroom. And with student voice comes an enormous capacity to improve our practice, which we're always on a continuous learning loop, where we're always trying to improve our practice. So it dovetails with what Mrs. Alphone was mentioning.
yes, questions now, we're done, I promise.
I gotta do this part too, because I just didn't think about that. But they can ask questions on this first, yeah.
Going back to the student growth and how it's measured, I thought I heard you mention from 9 to 12, there's no testing correlations between the teachers?
There's no SGP.
There's nothing that is
So-
reported by the state in terms of how did the test score of that student connect to a particular teacher.
Okay, but we have teachers that teach AP courses.
Yes.
Is there a correlation
No.
there and there? There's none?
No, there's no correlation done
their
between AP
evaluation,
scores,
how
no.
the kids
You have to
do.
remember, this is a state
I know, but
model,
for
yeah.
our person, when.
Oh, yeah, for
Well,
us as a district?
not internally,
Yeah.
actually, this will
Certainly.
cover
Oh,
that.
yes, yes.
This will, Lincoln
Yes.
will cover that.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
we do have internal benchmarking that we
Yes.
use, which is actually a
That's
better
not-
indicator of student.
And we
Perfect.
do
Thank you.
use that to help guide our decisions regarding
Yeah.
who is teaching what course,
Right.
what are the enrollments in the courses, that's totally clear.
Because SGP is student growth percentiles based on NJSLA scores are limited in the information they provide. You know, so it's very limited because the data we get from those scores leaves us 2 layers from where we need to be instructionally. So, and that's why this benchmarking assessment is so important, which I'll talk about.
So is the student survey a way to incorporate individual kids either raving about their teacher or having complaints about their teacher?
It's more feedback. It's
Just
like,
feedback.
how do you feel that you've benefited from the learning type of thing? Not like, did you think did I do a good job or not a good job? It's more reflective on the part of the student to see if this learning matched with their style, the way that was the information understandable to them. You know, I have to say, so many teachers who have participated in this portion of it, because it's a part of the reflective practice and not, you know, we encourage all teachers to ask your students, but it's amazing how many times they're like, oh, I never thought to do that. You know, I often say in education, at times we axe out the most important person, the student. You know, when we talk about parent-teacher conferences and, you know, goal setting. Well, that student is the center of that. So, you know, asking them, their experience with the learning, I think, is a really important part, but it's more about that and their reflection of their own intake of the learning versus like, do you think I did a good job? Although, there's kind of read between the lines stuff there when you put that kind of survey out to students.
I actually was going to ask about surveying in general, and I know it seems like the teachers who are pursuing the path of doing the personalized reflection profile in lieu of an observation, let's say, they can pick that. But the others teachers, right now, there's no formal or informal way that the administrator who's evaluating the teacher is soliciting feedback from the student or the parents. And I'm wondering if there's an opportunity there. Like you said, not do you think Mrs. Whoever is the good teacher, but does she motivate you? Do you feel confident in her class? Do you feel that she's fair or whatever? And not so much in the elementary school, but I have my 2 daughters are in middle school. I do feel like, I mean, 99% of their teachers are fantastic. They rave about them. They feel challenged. They're enjoying it.
Right.
There are a few who I feel like there's an opportunity for that teacher to focus and work on their motivation of students especially. And I'm wondering if there's an opportunity for maybe the administrator as part of the teacher practice score that goes into it to solicit feedback from the kids. And not, do you think Mrs. Whoever is a good teacher, but really diving into, are they motivating you? Do you feel challenged? Do you feel that the class is fair? Those types of questions to inform that teacher practice score. Because right now, with the exception of the people going through the personalized reflective profile path, it seems like there's not a mechanism to solicit that feedback. And unless as a parent, you know, I encourage my girls when they have issues, go to the teacher. If that's not working, go to guidance. If that's not working, go to the principal. But that's a lot to ask a kid to do just to provide feedback on a teacher.
So I think it's kind of like a dicey situation when you put a survey in a kid's lap that does that, but as I'm thinking of our tool and how we use it, we do have certain indicators that require a teacher reflective piece. Like that is part of the overall evaluation process. Like we rate them on their own reflection of instruction. So my first thought would be, you know, if we can encourage teachers through the vehicle of content directors, building administrators to utilize student feedback as part of their reflection, that becomes indirectly embedded in that tool.
I guess the difference that I would see there is if the teacher's asking the kid, how am I doing? The kid's gonna say, great, because they're afraid it's gonna tie back.
Well,
I feel like it should be more the administrator of the building or you guys as central office saying, okay, teacher, we'll evaluate you based on what we see when you walk in. And honestly, I mean, I've never sat in on an evaluation, but I know I've heard from my kids, oh, there was somebody in the back of the room today and Mrs. Yada Yada acted very differently. So I think there's a multifaceted view that needs to be employed beyond just the teacher self-reflecting and administration looking at the teacher at certain times, where the customers deserve a chance to bubble up. And I know, I'm not saying you're not doing that now, but there's not, from what I can see, a formal, and I understand it's not quantitative data, it's survey data, it's opinions, but if you have just a gauge, like a directional, litmus test to say, this teacher's getting a lot of, the kids are not feeling motivated, we should probably look at that. Or the administrator can say, that's something I need you to work on as part of your goals for next year, or whatever. Or on the flip side, when there are teachers who every student is saying, this teacher is awesome, I love coming to class, there's something magic there that you want to foster and continue and maybe feed them into the mentor program or whatever. I just feel like the student feedback piece needs to be more front and center. And I guess I'd also ask, is there some tracking or mechanism where at the administrative level, for the building principals especially, if guidance has gotten 30 emails about one teacher, is that factoring in anywhere? How does that trigger some sort of follow-up? Because I'm not going to name names, but the teachers that my girls have had, I won't say issues with, but have had feedback that I've then asked other parents, because that's what we do. Did you have this person? Did you have this person? What did you think? It always seems to be, there's a consensus in the parent community that teacher has had the same issues for multiple years. And I, as a parent, am very reluctant to kind of interfere too much, because I don't want a helicopter, and I want my kids to advocate for themselves, but my kids don't have that purview. They're not going to kids 3 years older than them saying, tell me about your experiences with Mrs. Whoever, I'm just wondering if there's some way to better allow the district administration to really gather that feedback, and I'm wondering how, when you do get it, through the informal channels of us kind of raising it up the flagpole, how is that factored into the teacher practice score every year?
Hey, if I could jump in here too, what I would say here in this moment is when I first became a teacher 33 years ago, right? We had lead teachers, and those lead teachers were department heads, and they actually taught classes. I was one of those 10 years in. I became one of those. And we actually taught classes, but at the same time, this was on the secondary level, we oversaw that department, right? And so we had an intimate knowledge of what students thought as it related to teachers, and we also knew what their practice looks like in reality, because we were there all the time. 33 years later, with budget constraints and everything else, that model has gone away. But it is why we've implemented the subject-specific model. It's really important to have, and by the way, we're talking about what students think about professors, right? John Carrigan, who's our subject-specific director for mathematics, is the #1 requested professor at Rutgers University in mathematics. So and I also teach on the college level, and our students, they get surveys, they provide written feedback. That written feedback goes to the department chairs, and then the department chairs turn it back to us, and I really take that into account on what I do. So the subject-specific instruction is so important in elementary, which we've created, those supervisors in special education, in mathematics, in language arts. That's really important. And then there's also the building level. But I can tell you, as someone who was on the phone yesterday with a parent who had a concern on the middle school level, that when it gets to 30 people that have addressed concerns, whether they be students or whether they be staff members, I know. Everyone knows. I know. And then the first thing we try to do is put supports in place for that educator to address those concerns. But then that would precipitate from us more time, more support, more involvement to make sure that we really know. And those our high school principals, if you were to ever walk the hallways with Patricia Cartier, she stops and talks to kids all the time. They know that they could talk to her. I would say the exact same thing about Mr. Kirkpatrick. They're there all the time. We were there last night in formal and informal settings where kids have that opportunity. So we all have a pretty good idea, and then we'll hear from John, or I'll hear from Charlene, or Mrs. Alphone that, hey, here's what's going on. Or it could be from one of our elementary principals. And then what we do is we really focus to make sure we get a plan in place to provide them the supports, but also that we follow up, because it goes back to, hey, I'm superintendent again, and we gotta have measurable outcomes, and there has to be accountability. So when it gets that kind of level, every time. The situation that I dealt with yesterday wasn't nearly as many, but it was a concern about a parent with a relationship between the student and the parent, and we'll sit down with that student and that parent and have meetings. That's going on right now in one of our middle schools right now, based on what we had yesterday. So what I'm saying, I'm giving you real honest feedback. That's what's supposed to happen every single time, and whenever the parents request it, that's what we do. And I would say that I'm an advocate for all children. I look at all 9,601 kids as if they're my own child, right? And we expect, that's the expectation we have with all of our educators, But you have every right, certainly, and I fully respect your right to advocate for your child, and we have the responsibility to address those things in the moment. I do think we can expand specifically on what you said. We can expand on surveying students, because I think there's a lot of us that truly believe high-performing educators believe in reflective practice. Highly performing anybody, moms, believe in reflective practice, and they're thinking back about how this went with our sons or daughters, and how we could have done this differently, and how this conversation could have went differently. We have the same responsibility on our level. So I think we can seriously look to build upon that, and that's part of our vision, and that's why we start with the portfolio. We start with this self-reflective process, and then we take the best components once those educators share that with other educators, and we get more participation and more involvement. But the evaluation process on a state-wide is what it is, and those are two separate things.
And let me just clarify, when you have a chance to open the presentation and look at it, and you look at the descriptors of what are the components of our Danielson framework, there is a final domain, and that is a domain regarding teacher performance that's done when the teacher sits down with their administrator to do their summative evaluation. At that time, the administrator is going to evaluate that teacher based on communicating with families, growing and developing professionally, and how they performed with their professional responsibilities. Those three components are absolutely evaluated and captured in the summative evaluation. And any principal who has been hearing any of this potential negative feedback over and over and over again, first of all, I'm sure that they're working on correcting it in the moment, but it is certainly something that would be captured in that teacher's summative evaluation. So indirectly, student feedback is already, indirectly, parent feedback is part of the summative evaluation. Communicating with families, growing and developing professionally, and following through with their professional responsibilities. They're all there. So when you have a chance to look at that, go to domain 4.
And I just want to add one thing which made me think of it, because it wasn't touched upon, because you had mentioned something regarding, that teacher acted differently when there's a requirement to do unannounced observations under the language of Achieve. So, we try most oftentimes to have our content directors, as Dr. George mentioned, they do those unannounced, and they're intentionally unannounced, because we don't want to see something artificial. We want to see what is reality every day, so that we can support staff members when there is something that might be challenging them or they might need to grow with.
I have a question about the state testing for all, like say in math, for all 7th graders. Are all 7th graders taking the same exact math test?
There's different versions.
Different versions. Okay, so then you have your honors math students and then you have your regular math students. So the teachers that are connected to the honors students, how do they see the growth in those students with the state testing, if the state testing is
not.
So growth is relative to the student's self. So it's based upon each student's individual score and their cohort of peers that scored like them in the previous year. So it's all metrics based on how the performing band or grouping of students did the year before. And it is growth relative to self. So for instance, in an honors math class, students that are, performing highly, it's growth relative to their performance, their high performance. Whereas a student that might not be as well versed in mathematics, their growth is relative to their baseline performance as well. It's all equated so that there is some equity involved there. So it's not like you're in an honors class, you're getting shortchanged on the growth end now, because the growth might be less numerically for a student in an honors class versus a student in a blended classroom where there are varying abilities. So there is equating and metrics behind the scenes that helps to accommodate that.
Then how can you, when you're looking at a teacher that is an honors teacher,
sure,
how do you know they're being effective with that?
So I'm going to talk about this too, because I think it's a good when I talk about Link It, because this benchmarking assessment is really important, because as I said before, I want to steer us away from like the NJSLA and those test results as being the best measure of student progress and of teacher capacity, because this is really a better and more consistent and continuous way to monitor those two things. It really is.
I just have a question to piggyback on what Rachel's saying. I think we all know at least one example of a teacher who seems as if he or she's entrenched in the district and has been there forever. Does a lot of this have to do with the subject matter? If there's an example of a teacher, say, who's not in the core curricula, and he or she basically takes care of, some of the electives and stuff like that, are the standards as rigorous for somebody who's, say, teaching photography? Or not even art, but say like at the middle school level, teaching like an elective like photography, as opposed to somebody at this middle school level who's teaching, math and science, which is a little bit more of a measurable component to a child's day. How do you address someone who's doing an elective, maybe has been there for a number of years, appears to be maybe not as motivating to the students, and yet because it's an elective environment, because the kids are there because they chose it, there's more of that feeling like, well, I picked this, I'm here, this teacher may not be giving me what I expected, but because of the curricula, they may or may not feel like they need to talk about it externally, and yet they're having, say, a somewhat miserable experience in that classroom.
I think that I can answer this question. One of the first domains is planning and preparation. Every single course in our district, whether it is a required course like math or language arts, or an elective, has an up-to-date curriculum guide that's written, that's aligned to the New Jersey Student Learning Standards. So one of the things the teacher has to do as part of the evaluation is provide the plans for the lesson that was just observed. And there needs to be a clear connection between the New Jersey Student Learning Standards in every single subject in terms of learning outcomes, enduring understanding, essential questions, how they're assessing their students, what are the students doing, what are the teachers doing, regardless of whether it's an elective like photography, or if it's a, AP English class or a, AP Calc class. So that still must be maintained. And we are also always still looking for those high indicators of student engagement and of students taking things to the next level and of students being engaged in a way that shows their passion for the subject, whether it be art, photography, or a more traditional. And that is a significant part of Domain 1 in the evaluation. What do those lesson plans look like? Do they meet the New Jersey Student Learning Standards for that subject?
How does this affect teachers that work with the kids with IEPs and other special needs? That where academic growth will be, it's the flip side of the kids that are very gifted, whose growth might not jump very much.
And that's why I think and we promote the mindset of growth relative to self, because we do have diversity in learning abilities across the district and needs that, you know, students might have to have supported. So when we sit down with a special education teacher and discuss student progress, we really emphasize that growth relative to self mindset, because it's about student progress in regards to their place in time, you know, when that first baseline was established, whether it be the beginning of a year, whether it be, you know, over the course of a cycle of years. But, you know, unfortunately, the state, when they put out a standardized test like that, doesn't see it that way. You know, like the understanding is that like everybody's going to take the same test. You're all going to be assessed at these grade level standards. So what we do is we do a deep dive into other pieces of data, not only that NJSLA, to capitalize and promote those areas of growth that those students and teachers did make, and set realistic short-term goals. And you know, that's kind of the marriage with this SGO piece too that Mrs. O'Hagan talked about. It gives us the opportunity to set short-term goals for students that are rigorous but also attainable, and that brings in that idea of growth relative to self.
Right. And what we also do when we create those SGOs with teachers is we encourage them to set a goal but tier their class. So there's one overarching goal, but the expectation for what that growth is tiered based upon the student's baseline when they start. So your lower performing students at the start still have a ceiling of growth that we want them to maintain. It may not be as high as the highest performing, but growth in terms of self is not negotiable. It's absolutely required, which is why most SGOs are tiered. So a teacher doesn't have a class of students that are all at the same level. So we tier it based upon their starting point when the SGO was written, and we match their progress according to the tier that they were in.
So I think this is an important piece that I want to segue into, because it's connected to the areas we're talking about. We have launched our Lincoln Parent Portal. I hope you got a phone blast last night, because I know it went out, that you'll be receiving a letter in the mail probably by Wednesday or Thursday, which will give you logon instructions for setting up your portal account. It has a unique registration code that is a one-time use. You set up your account, you know, you answer all the security questions, so if you need to reset your password, it eliminates everybody having to email me for password resets. But we did send letters, and we mailed them purposely because obviously they're case sensitive, they're code sensitive. So they should arrive by the mid to end of the week. So what is Linkit? Linkit, as Dr. George and I know Mrs. O'Hagan also touched upon it, it's our data warehousing system. So it's where we enter our local assessment data, such as FMP, DRA, quarterlies. Like there's a whole host of data that we are in the process of building templates for and entering. The beauty of Linkit is that it's archived data, so the students' assessment data follows them over the course of time. So we have this historical profile of assessment information that follows the student and then is accessible to next year's teacher because it marries with our student information system. So we'll always be current. It resyncs every night, which is great. The other side of it, which I've kind of alluded to a couple of times, is the benchmarking system. So we have come to a place within the district where we are administering benchmark assessments on Lincoln in both ELA and mathematics, in most cases 3 times per year. There is a Form A, which happens in the fall, a winter, which obviously is the Form B, and then a C. I mention this because these assessments are directly tied to the grade level standards in mathematics and English language arts, which gives the teachers the ability and the administrators the ability to monitor student progress related to standards and look at that growth relative to self as tied to the standards, which is what we are responsible for throughout the course of a year, prior to having that more summative NJSLA assessment, which the data that we get, as I said before, is really 2 layers above instructionally where we need it to be. This dives it all the way down to the skill. So it takes the standard, it breaks it apart topically, and then also skill-based. And I'm going to show you today one of the features in the portal where you can see your students' progress if they've taken one of these math or literacy assessments tied to standard, topic, and skill, so that you'll have a picture of, how your student is progressing with those standards. We had a committee that worked, we've been working since November in kind of how is this launch going to look. We didn't want to inundate the public with information because a lot of it is very interpretive, and we wanted to make sure we gave out good support materials to coincide with the data that we were putting out there. Because it's important as a consumer that you have a perspective on what this information shows and means. So the committee, it was administrators, teachers, and parents, so that we had a broad perspective of consumer, teachers, and also administrators, kind of as oversight as to, what is it going to look like in the rollout? What are we rolling out to start? Because we are putting out select assessments first, and the purpose for that is we want to make sure the guidance going along with it is strong. So that way you don't see something in the portal that is not able to understand easily, so you can make some meaning out of it. So we did orchestrate what we are going to put out there to start, and I'll show you a resource which kind of covers that. You will have access to those benchmark assessment pieces of information. As soon as they're taken on the system, they are already married to the student's profile, so you can easily jump in and see, how your student is progressing with those skills and standards. I do want to show you that piece because I think it's really important just to get a perspective on what it looks like. So when you get your code, I created that. Okay, so you'll set up on that front page your first time with your registration code. That's where it says have a registration code. You'll type it in and it'll prompt you through it. There is guidance online in a video tutorial of how to log on. There's also screenshots in the letters, so you can just put it side by side with your computer and work from there as well. So this is what you will see when you log in. I know it's a little tough to see, but you'll see it's broken down currently in language arts and mathematics. It groups the assessment by content depending on what they're tagged behind the scenes to be. You can sort it. There's all kind of sorting features. Important to note, and it does explain this on the tutorial that we have up online, and I'll show you where those resources are. There's a date in the upper right-hand corner. Right now, this is grabbing any assessment that happened after August 1st. You can go backwards in time and see more. But again, like I said, you're going to be limited in what we see right now because we're being very strategic in how we roll out and the resources that accompany that. So the one I wanted to pull up and show you is this is kind of the overview profile. It gives you like a snapshot of each assessment that was taken. Right now I'm looking at Linkit assessment, benchmark assessments, and also NJSLA scores are on here. They do a data export for us and just put it all in there. We have 2 years worth active right now. We figured that was a good start, especially because a few years prior, Park and NJSLA kind of changed. So we wanted to keep it consistent. It is 2 years worth of NJSLA if your child has taken 2 years worth. What I do want to point out, and going back to that growth relative to self kind of idea, is this details button. It is an active button. If you click on it, it's going to pull up. This is a Linkit Form B, so this was given very recently in January. And as you can see, it pulls up the actual information related to this specific assessment. The first piece, and I know it's hard to see, but there's a tutorial also online where you'll be able to see this live, and I walk you and talk you through it. But this first half is an item analysis. It gives you just basically correct versus incorrect responses. And it also gives you the time that your child spent on each question, which I think is important. It also gives it as compared to the class average of time spent. I know I have one at home that will click, 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 I'm done. And I would be able to know that. And he'd be like, I tried my hardest, Mom. But when you're spending 1 second, he's also the one that doesn't want to wash his knees ever. So, take that for what you will. So The more important information, I mean, that's great if you want to see if they're like kind of breezing through this and not taking it seriously. And actually, this becomes really important, especially at our higher levels where kids tend to be like, eh. But again, I go back to that, we need to make the student part of the conversation, and this is a powerful tool in doing that. Like, hey, I noticed that you didn't spend a lot of time on this. I want to help you and assist you in progressing. We need to put more effort into this. So those types of things are definitely conversations, and certainly we encourage parents to have those conversations at home as well. So the next piece is the standards. So important to note, every single Linkit assessment, A, B, and C, measures the full complement of standards for the entire year. So it's really, really important that we don't get hung up on the percentage or the score on A or B, really. And it's really important because it is giving us a baseline. It's seeing and predicting based on this information, how will the student do by the time the year ends? So right now, if you think back to what I showed you on the front screen, this was a like bright green coding. That means that this student is projected to exceed expectations by the end of the year. Linkit has a high accuracy rate in predictability on NJSLA. That is because they are both assessments, this one and the NJSLA, are created from the same exact blueprint. So there's a blueprint that test makers for Pearson use to make the NJSLA. Linkit is using the same exact blueprint to make this assessment. So therefore, with a high number of students taking the test, right? Because obviously higher numbers increases your validity and reliability, coupled with same blueprint, this is a really, really good indicator of how the student will do on the NJSLA. And I bring that up, not because I am like, oh, the NJSLA is the end all be all. It allows us to remediate things early on. And it's that growth relative to self and that monitoring individual progress all the way down to the skill that is really, really the most important feature of this. Good.
Who's evaluating this information?
We are as a district.
Okay, for like a random student, and like, how does this?
So teachers have this data in their classrooms locally. They are able to pull reports from here, and as Dr. George mentioned, this is the data that they're analyzing in those grade level meetings, on those, articulation days. It's what's driving the work of our building, learning, design teams. So we are using this information. It's how we have students set goals for personalized learning. It's how we continuously monitor student progress, because it is a good way to monitor and checkpoint throughout the year. It also, a Form A, we were kind of like Form A, it's hard to give a kid an assessment on things they may have never seen, but there are a couple of reasons why. Number one, it sets the baseline for that growth relative to self. Number two, it allows us at times to adjust our pacing. For instance, I sat with a teacher early on in the year who had a half and half split on Form A, meaning half were expected to partially meet expectations by the end of the year, but the other half was projected to exceed expectations. Now, as a teacher, I want to know that off the bat, because that's kind of like an anomaly. Usually we have a couple on the high end, a couple on the low end. Most of them are projected in the middle, that typical bell curve. But this teacher was like, wow, if I didn't see that information, it probably would have taken me a couple of months to understand that big picture. Because, half of the kids are already having a certain degree of mastery or projecting to have mastery very easily with grade level standards, makes me want to adjust my pacing. I might be able to do different things, other things within the bounds of the curriculum, and really extend the learning for those students. But at the same time, I have to know, I have some students that I'm going to have to spend some time with. So Form A is really, really important for that. So this is the standards tie. It shows you the language of the standard, the coding of the standard, the questions tied to the standard, and right or wrong. And again, I caution you on, don't get hung up on the percentage or the number. It's more about the progress relative to the standard. If you go to the next section, I'll just kind of breeze right through. These are two, I think, important pieces for, kind of general understanding. It's how they're translating topics and skills. If I read to any one of you the standards language, you'd probably be like, okay, let's pull it apart for me, right? So when I come down here to skills though, and I say, okay, this skill is about character, there's a higher likelihood that you'll be able to support your child at home by looking at the skill. And it shows you the percentage, the number of questions dedicated to that skill and whether the student got those right or wrong. So it breaks it down, very granularly, so that way you have an understanding of what is actually happening. Directly tied to the standards, which is the beauty of it.
Can you click on it and see the question they got wrong?
No, we have not, and this is why. Because, this is why, not because, and our teachers have the ability to do that for instructional reasons. We did not, the committee, and I agree with this rationale right now, until Linkit comes up with a way to create multiple versions that they change and alter, we want to keep the fidelity of the test by keeping those questions preserved. You know what I mean? Because you know how it happens. Like, hey, did you click on that? Because the students can have access to this too. Did you get question number 7 and they start passing it, because that's how kids operate. I mean, it's the reality.
But it will tell you in time to come to like math, fractions.
Yes.
So if you see a lot of students in whatever, 7th grade, have done poorly on that section, if you can adjust the curriculum.
Yeah. And that's why for us, at that 80,000 foot perspective, it's a really powerful tool because now we have a mechanism for compiling information and looking at those trends, which, everything kind of sat in silos before. So, and teachers have the same reporting capacity. So a teacher that teaches, so in the 4th, 5th grade departmentalized setting, for instance, they have the ability to run a report and look at everybody on the whole, individual students, they can form individual groups of students. I can, to address somebody's question before of like trends in efficiency of teachers, I can look at that from my perspective and see where scores are higher, where they're lower at different points of the year, which gives me a different perspective. And we have the ability to, behind the scenes, to tie performance to individual staff. I mean, parents don't have that, teachers don't have that, but we have that ability. And so we can pull so many pieces of information from this that is, number one, growth relative to self, right, over time, and also tied to standard. And those are really the two most important things. So you'll have the ability to look at these reports for your children. Again, as I said, we had determined that we weren't going to put out, I want to go back for a second, we weren't going to put out everything all at once. So if you go to the curriculum and instruction tab on the district website, there's a Linkit Parent Portal Resources tab, and on here, there are coinciding video tutorials. I'm sorry, you're gonna have to listen to my voice again. They're all short, under 5 minutes, about, kind of walking you through what you're seeing, setting up your account. There is also guidance on the purposes of Form A, B, and C. Again, very important to understand that. Also, there is an FNP for Fontes and Pinnell, our reading benchmarking system at the elementary level, understanding not so much the letter, but the reading behaviors associated with the level, because that's where the support can occur at home. If I just tell you your kid's a level D, that is meaningless. So that's why I'm talking about these support pieces being so important, because I want to know what D means, because I want to know how I can support my student at home. So that's on there. We also have understanding, I'm just trying to see if I skipped anything. Benchmark assessment. Oh, this is the one I wanted to show you. This document, very important, because it shows you what's available right now by grade level. And it tells you the release date, because we need to give teachers time to enter data. So there's like a buffer for when it's administered, or like F&P. Teachers do this over the course of a few weeks. They have to enter the information into the system. So we have a date publicized where you'll be able to access that information. Again, we are going to add to this over time as we get the community's feet wet with it, get them to understand and be comfortable with the things that they are seeing, and then add to those resources and put more things out there and available. So that will kind of be an evolution over the next, the second half of the year into next year.
It's awesome. I mean, thank you for making it accessible to us. I mean, I imagine how valuable it is for you guys to be able to see this and be able to make decisions based on it, but to be able to have that view into your child is phenomenal. So thank you for making it accessible to us. And does it only go through 8th grade, or does high school?
All the way to high
All
school.
through, okay, great.
So we take Lincoln Benchmarks assessment currently in math, grades 2 through high school, depending on your course. So you take it in Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and Geometry. They, at the high school level, only take it 2 times a year, although we might be evolving to 3 next year. They eliminate the Form A. Goods and bads with that, but that's something that might come down where we add A in the future. For literacy, it's grades 3 through 11. So you take it in English 1, 2, and 3, and then in all of your literacy courses moving up. There is, and people ask this question, so I'm putting it out there, there is the availability of K1 and 2 to take it. We just don't feel like it's developmentally appropriate. Kids can barely read. We don't want to put them in front of a screen. We have other measures in place to gain information about our students. So we feel that at this time, 2nd grade math is kind of where we felt, okay, they have enough reading ability. There's a text-to-speech feature where they read the questions if a child does have decoding and fluency, struggles at that point. But beyond that, we've kind of just said, this is where we're going to have it lie. And we've had great results with it and really, really, really strong feedback.
Is there consideration for, in the feedback, not just saying if they got it right or wrong, but what kind of mistake they made? So I'm thinking like in math, like let's say they totally get the skill, but they made a mathematical, like an arithmetic error.
Well, that they solve on a piece of paper. So it's a multiple choice assessment. So the teacher would be able to go back and look at the actual answer the child put, and then have and again, including that student. And that's why we promote that question being used as an instructional tool. So that way you can say to the student, hey, I see that, this one was difficult for you. We did, and we always say to the teachers, well, you're gonna capitalize on the things you've already taught to some degree of mastery that kids have not mastered. And that's where you're gonna aim your efforts right now, because you might have skills and standards that you didn't fully teach yet. So, and especially in math. Math is definitely more like that than literacy. I watched, and here's a concrete example. I watched a lesson on character being delivered in 1st grade, and I watched a lesson on character being delivered in 11th grade. Both appropriate, both rigorous in their own regards, but kids see that information all through the course of their literacy. Mathematics, on the other hand, is more all or nothing in that sense, black and white. I won't see fractional concepts in manipulating operations, multiplication, division, like denominators till 4th and 5th grade, maybe a little in 3rd. So I know that if I haven't taught it, chances are they haven't had exposure yet, unless they've gotten it from somewhere else. So it's that opportunity, to answer your question, where I sit down with the child and I say, let's talk about this. What are you still not understanding? Tell me your thought process. Those are really all important and really is what personalized learning is. All right, let's set a goal for you. Let's look at your information and let's see where we can make a plan to either remediate something, extend something, because extension is just as important. The extension piece of this.
But so does the fact that kid got that wrong, so it's gonna look like the kid doesn't know how to multiply fractions. Say the standard says multiplying fractions, and the kid really knows how to multiply fractions, but just made a mathematical error. Maybe they were rushing, maybe because they know it so well that they were rushing. Does that fact go with them and go with the teacher because that it's not broken down on Lincoln?
No, but also we have to remember this is only one measure. So obviously in all classes, teachers are using other mechanisms of formative assessment. So as a teacher, I'm thinking teacher hat now, I give an assessment on fractions, and this one particular student does very well, seems to have mastered fractions, and then on the assessment, there's a disconnect. Because now, it's important to also understand that this is one piece. We promote with our teachers the comparison of data, because what data does is it gets us to ask questions. So the questions I would ask would be, why is there that disconnect? And I would sit down with the student and say, here, look, this was your result from your fraction chapter test. You did really well, and then I see on these items you didn't do so well, as well. Let's talk about it. Why do you think that is? Is there something you're still not fully understanding? sometimes kids suffer or have that consequence of they master for the purpose of the test and it's really not mastery, and then they go to take the benchmark a few months later and it's like, I know we taught this, so it wasn't really true mastery, it's kind of like fake mastery, so to speak, and that happens. Yeah, it's temporary. So, I mean, teaching deeply, and that's why this is important information for teachers. And that's why we promote the use of every piece of available data we have, including teacher instinct, because that's important too. Data is confirming and refuting, but I always say teacher instinct is the most powerful thing we have, because they know their learners. And data confirms and gets us to ask questions or drives us in different directions. And that's where this artistry and creativity with teaching comes in, because their instinct is so powerful. But they need information to steer, right? So that's what this does. And I would look at that as a collective picture versus and this isn't, this is an internal document. This obviously is accessible to next year's teacher. But again, if this occurred and the student is a strong math student, and there was a disconnect, my question as a teacher would be why? So we're trying to educate our staff in that process, and that's our job, is to get our staff to understand how are we using data, what are the questions we're asking, and that's why these learning design teams have been so invaluable, because now teachers aren't sitting in a classroom independently, in a silo, they're working with others, and they're having those conversations and saying, my kid struggled with fractions, they just did terribly, tell me how you're teaching it. Those conversations can happen as a product of this information. So,
you're giving a lot of information,
yeah,
which is great. This looks really great. But, so, would I be able to see how the other kids in our class did on a specific test?
No. So
my daughter says to me a lot, "Oh, the other kids didn't do well," and it's just good to know. Does she need to get more information from the outside, or is it how she's processing it internally? And to me, I tell my daughter, if you're really participating, no matter what the teacher does, you're going to do well. So, luckily, my daughter does well, and that's true. She's engaged, she does well, and so it's trying to guide her.
Right. And I'm a promoter of your kid best in most regards. So I think that if you feel she does a good job of kind of ascertaining the situation, I'd be inclined to say, if she says, everyone didn't do so well, I'd be inclined to believe that. Now, if you're a parent of a kid like my son,
perception is her perception.
Right. But and I would encourage her to advocate for herself. I'm assuming she's a high school student.
She is. And she went to the teacher.
Yeah.
She said something to me the other day that made it a little different. She said, "I'm concerned I'm not going to be prepared for English."
Okay.
To me,
that's a real concern.
I need to look at it more than it's just you're not loving the teacher right at this point.
Right.
So,
right. And I think that it's important. Those conversations are really important, and how they come about, whether it's spurred through this data or in other places. I think it warrants her having a conversation with you and the teacher, and just kind of seeing why she's feeling that way, even because her perception is her reality, and we have to pay attention to that, in my opinion. And I don't know. So to go back to what you had asked, no, we don't put that comparative information up there, because we don't. It's really, this is about student to self, and we don't want to create that comparison where that's not the point of this. And that's the reason behind why.
Well, as you said, you have to deal with how people are going to respond to this information.
Right.
I'm always very focused on what can my daughter do to do better.
Right.
I'm not going to be blaming the teacher.
Sure.
Severe, but I understand.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
I'm just wondering, is this going to be kind of like Power School, where we invite and encourage the kids to track for themselves, or is this more meant to be a parent resource?
It is actually called the Parent-Student Portal. That's what I think it promotes it to be, because we want and we encourage them to take ownership of their learning and be involved. So, putting my parent hat on, if this were me, my kid's district is not in a place with this yet, but I would be inclined to sit down with my child and say, hey, look, let's take a look at this. Let's look at how you did. I want you to be an active participant in now. Some teachers, what teachers will typically do now is not have kids log onto the portal, because we haven't set them up that way. They'll print out the sheet and they'll sit with kids in small conferring sessions, even at the high school level, to set goals. And I think, yes, including them in the conversation, 100%.
So will the teachers be kind of explaining to the kids, hey, there's this new way to look at your performance and here's how you should read it and don't freak out about this and focus on this? Or I'm just wondering, like for me, I have to learn how to read this and then I have to try to help my kids navigate it as well. I'm just wondering, are they also going to be told how to navigate it from the school side?
Well, right now, we're not giving, because there's one account for student/parent.
Got it.
So we're not having students set up accounts this way.
Okay.
So at this point, I would say parents should be having conversation with students, but teachers are also, the information that teachers can show students looks exactly like the
what we're gonna
portal.
see. Yeah, so they probably already have seen this
They've
and
seen a lot,
it's new to
yeah.
us.
They're
Yeah.
probably very familiar with it.
Okay.
Especially in places where you know that classrooms are working on individual goal setting and all of our teachers should be. And even we promote this for teachers in other content areas to utilize this for information, because for instance in literacy there are standards related to historical fiction and things that other content areas can actually capitalize and use. Like this is not in an isolation or bubble just for math and literacy, because to me this is more about like the learner's profile versus a content area.
I think this is great. I think it can give parents a lot of great information, but the component that bothers me a little bit is that the kids can they see their standardized test scores through this, their state test scores?
They have no ability to view that online from their perspective in the building right now. You'll see it.
I'll see it, but if they go on this portal, will they because it's student and parent.
Yes, but like I said, we have not even talked about the thought of setting up students on this yet. Like,
So they can only see if we log.
Only if we log in.
And show them they can, but they
Okay.
can't log on in school internally and see that at all. All they get to see through this is the testing platform or what the teacher prints out for them, like in a score report sheet.
Okay.
They have no ability to log on. They actually don't even take the assessment through the platform on the web. They take it through an app. It's just like they do for NJSLA. It's an app located on their Chromebook. They log in with a code that is specific to the test, and it's very protected. So they know. Unless you want them to see it, they do not.
Okay.
We have to kind of watch our time too.
But this is all posted, and certainly my email is accessible. If you have specific questions, certainly reach out. Like I said, you'll get your codes later on this week. Set up your accounts, play with it a little bit. If you do have questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So let's again, because of the interest of time, let's move on a little bit. So there's no one here from Diverse Learners. The information is there. The only addition to it is now the My Beautiful Stutter screening is May 20th at High School North. And I'll see if Pam has any Board of Education updates.
I think Dr. George and Mrs. Dougherty did a good job of explaining about the budget and the consolidation proposal. March 4th is the budget, tomorrow night, and then we don't vote on the proposed consolidation until the 11th. We put it off a week so we can hear from more members of the public. And we are getting a lot of concerns from the public. One of them I just got now says, can you comment on the additional consolidation questions I asked about extending the grandfathering to families, allowing all Pomo kids to have busing, or giving them the option to attend a closer school?
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, so we did grandfather in the students that are currently in Port Monmouth in any of the potential redistricting options moving forward for the time that they would be in New Monmouth. So that piece has.
What about the new Monmouth kids that were already at New Monmouth and say the consolidation was the?
No, that would not impact them because they would not move. It would only be the students.
They would not move if we got
Yeah.
redistricting. Okay.
I didn't say they would not move. I said they had not moved. They would be treated like
So they
everyone.
could be redistricted.
They would be treated like anyone else.
Okay.
That's correct. It's not probable. A lot of it, when we talk about the lines of redistricting, they're most likely to impact the more crowded sections of town, not the less crowded sections of town. Although we will take a comprehensive approach to do everything we can to lower those class sizes across the district. For some schools, that might actually be putting more students into them when it's appropriate based on how much space they have. For others, it might mean less. just depending on whatever those enrollments are and what those projected enrollments are moving forward. I think the areas that are particularly hard hit by the potential of this proposal are those families that live in very close proximity to Port Monmouth School and that are on the west side of, in close proximity to the school on the west side of Highway 36, because they don't receive transportation, right? And I have been there in the morning and watched them walk to school with older siblings, grandparents, parents, whoever, and parents have told us and said that they moved to that section of town because they wanted to be close to the school. I remember doing that myself. There was a time when I lived directly across from the middle school, and I understand how for some parents, they see that as, especially in the time when when their children are gonna attend those schools, as a reason to purchase in that area. Now, unfortunately, we can't treat them differently than any other section of the town, other than, which we do in other sections of the town as well, review this on a case-by-case basis and look at the potential to attend, maybe in such close proximity, Harmony School, and set, because that's a very small number of people, and checking that on a case-by-case basis, as well as reviewing potential hardship. That's something we would do in any situation that we regularly do anyway, but that's something that we can consider. But the grandfathering in, that's another example of how we've listened to the community and making sure that, I know that's a big concern for the potentially them being, because of the consolidation, moving to New Monmouth, and then being moved again in subsequent years. But no, we have reviewed that possibility, and we know that we can grandfather those students in to New Monmouth as their only move in their elementary career.
Okay, and just so I'm
Can I
clear about the
ask
busing.
one clarification? I think the question was families. So if potentially a child is 4 right now, or 3, and this happens, the families of Port Monmouth move to New Monmouth, they wouldn't move again. But would that child who's not yet registered for kindergarten, in the next couple of years, would they potentially go to a different school?
That is part of that case-by-case basis. We would review that on a case-by-case basis, just like we have to do, unfortunately, for our special education students.
I just think the wording of the question said families. And it doesn't just mean the kids that are currently K through 3.
Yeah.
It means the potential.
That's part of my answer on the case-by-case basis, just like we do for special education students who don't attend their typically zoned school.
And the busing though, Dr. George, where did we end up on the busing? What's in the proposal right now? I'm not clear.
Yeah, in the proposal right now, and this is clearly outlined in the questions online too, that we are projecting going from 3 buses to 4 buses, busing about 65% of the students, but not providing courtesy busing, because that would be no different than any other one of our 11 elementary schools, and there's a level of consistency that also transcends not only to consistency but additional costs. And I have to remind everyone, we wouldn't be in this situation if we weren't in a very significant,
Courtesy
budget
busing
crisis.
would be considered under 2 miles, people under 2 miles.
No
Right?
courtesy busing. No courtesy
So if
busing.
someone's asking for courtesy busing, they're asking because they're under the 2 miles.
That's
what you're
yes,
asking when they ask
yeah,
for
that would be less, on the elementary level, that would be less than 2 miles, and we don't currently provide that.
From what was stated earlier, there's still a $1.3 million gap in the budget that needs to be covered.
At this moment, and that's why it's a tentative budget.
Are there any other schools that are being looked at presently to possibly close that budget?
No, there's no other, and that's a great question. The other small elementary schools and the areas that they're in, this is why the administration and I, as superintendent, made this recommendation, is because that they would impact redistricting. So, for example, if you were to look at our other smaller elementary schools, they're either in areas where there is no place, let's say if they're on the west side of the town or the other side of 35, there's no place that we could take that population and put them in another building and do it and keep them all in place. And that was why we really looked hard, at any other possible solutions and said, we could not do that and do it within our current configuration. And we said from the beginning, the process of redistricting would be, would take longer than one school year because the impact it would have on transportation and because we would want to do an additional demographic study. So that's really important. So for example, if you were looking at any of the schools on the other side of 35, they're too big to be consolidated with any other school. And as a matter of fact, when you look at the population from the decrease in population in New Monmouth of 190 students from 2009-10 to where we are right now today, which is it's 4 students short of the population that we project there. And at that time, that pod was open-faced classrooms. There, so there were already students being educated in their open classrooms. Now we have 5 additional classrooms. We also have designated areas for occupational therapy, for speech, for resource room. All of those that will maintain the integrity of what they were intended to do. And we're going to take out the number of students that are in the preschool program with an intention, listening to what we heard from the community as part of the strategic planning process and what we're looking to do with special education as well, geographically place them in areas that will be better suited or closer to those students' regularly placed areas. So for example, you have students from Lincroft that are going to preschool right now at New Monmouth, and they will either be going to preschool at Fairview or Middle Village, which is significantly closer to where they would have to go to get to Harlem. So looking at those things across the board whenever we can, trying to listen to the feedback that we're getting from our community and implement that as we move forward. We'll continue to work with the board. We as an administrative team work with the Board of Education to write the plan from now to the end of the year and the next steps. Mrs. Rogers and the committee will be updating the board at our workshop sections of our Board of Education meetings moving forward to make sure that we give everybody, the latest accurate information.
Okay, all right, again, in the interest of time, let's just close out this part of the agenda. We're going to move all the way through to the end. Our next meeting is April 14th. The Whitson's folks are going to be here, give us an update. I guess their contract was renewed for another year. They want to talk about the initiatives they have